You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
5 o'clock this afternoon, Sky Stadium in Wellington. The Wellington Phoenix look to go back to the top of the table. If they avoid defeat against Adelaide United, they will spend a 9th straight week at the top of the table. Jacob Spoonley, former Phoenix and All Whites goalkeeper and now Sky Sport analyst, is with us to preview this one. What should we expect this afternoon when Wellington Phoenix play Adelaide United in general terms, Jacob?
Well, look, I think we've got two sides that haven't met expectations this year. A lot has been made about the Phoenix and them supposed to be down the bottom of the table, wooden spooners. And then Adelaide, I think everyone's expecting a lot more from Adelaide, and we simply haven't seen that. In actual fact, we've got the inverse. The Phoenix are up the top, competing with Central Coast, and Adelaide are now, I think it's 8 points adrift of 6th place. And really, Piney, the only way they're going to influence the playoffs is by deciding who else makes it.
You talk about that narrative, and at some point during the season, that narrative has to change. If it hasn't already, the whole, aren't they doing fantastically, Wellington, everybody thought they'd be down the bottom. Have you sensed a change of narrative that now people are talking about just how good this Wellington Phoenix team actually is?
Yes, but they're whispering it, Piney. There's not full-blown commitment yet. And I think that speaks to a couple of false starts that the Phoenix have had in the past. Obviously, that wonderful side that Ernie Merrick led, that showed a lot of promise but didn't quite deliver. I think if we're being really harsh and honest, Ufuk Tally's sides have got 3/4 of the way through the season and then probably succumbed to expectation. So I think there's a little bit of trauma in there for Phoenix fans. But, and this is important, we're seeing the Phoenix creeping into more stories in the media. There's more attention being garnered by this side that Italiano has wonderfully conducted up until this stage in the season. And I think once we realise over the next couple of weeks whether or not this Phoenix team are going to stumble, if they're going to stay step for step with Central Coast Mariners, they might even cut Melbourne Victory adrift, I reckon you'll probably see the volume turned up a lot more about not only a wonderful side, but a wonderful young New Zealand side.
Well, take us inside the playing group if you would. Put us in the boots of these players who, at the start of the season, were written off by just about everybody. Here they are with 8 games to go. They haven't been out of the top 2 pretty much since before Christmas. How are they feeling? Is the weight of expectation starting to become a factor on their young shoulders?
Well, I think there's 2 things at play here, Piney, and one is contingent, the other is what we're experiencing at the moment. So if we go to the latter first, this team is wonderfully naive. They are a side, as you say, that hasn't had to deal with the expectations of sides in the past. For a lot of them, it's their first season in professional football, and so they don't know any better. This is what they expect from playing week in, week out. They expect to be as organised and as well prepared as they have been. And then they are expecting to come up with the answers in the big moments. So there's that. And I think that's a real asset that they've got. And they can rely on that. That's a reservoir they can tap into. However, Piney, they've only lost twice this season. And each time they've bounced back really quickly. So if I am being negative, if I'm being a grey, a rainy cloud, then I'd say, there's now heightened expectation. There's more scrutiny the closer we get to the playoffs. And if this side does take a stumble, although they haven't shown it so far this season, the question that remains for me is how fast they can bounce back and how do they actually deal with the really sharp, pointy, highly critical end of the season.
How important then when that rolls around are guys who have had a lot of football? I look at Scott Wootton, I look at Alex Rufer, at David Ball, at Costa Barbarouses. With so many youngsters sprinkled throughout this playing squad, how key will their experience be?
You always anchor a team around a spine. And if you look at the names that you've just mentioned, you've gone back to front. Scott Wootton, who's anchoring a back line that has an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old in it, playing in front of a 21-year-old, Piney. Then Alex Rufer, who for me has been the most consistent performer in the midfield across the A-League. And I don't say that lightly. I think Rufer has been monumental in terms of doing all the dirty work, being a foundational piece for other players to then jump off from. And then if we want to talk about a renaissance man, Costa Barbarouses up top, who's scored in starts and in periods this year and have been highly productive. And I think the key thing is we're not even talking there about the likes of Božidar Krajev and Oscar Zavada, two of the standout performers across the A-League. But the one player in amongst all of that, Piney, who doesn't have the experience that you're talking to, but seems to be made for the big stage. And every time we see him play, every time he takes the field, because he has been injured this season, he brings an energy, he brings a sophistication, and he just seems to be somebody that is operating at a higher level than not necessarily his teammates, but definitely the opposition at times has been old. And I think he's going to be the player that could be the difference maker in those big moments. He doesn't shy away from the spotlight. It doesn't seem like the stage is too big for him. And I'm really keen today to see how he goes up against an Adelaide United side that will allow a lot of space in the midfield, because not only do they like attacking, Piney, but they often go behind early, and that lays the foundation for a very, very open game.
Yeah, he's a terrific player. I was going to say a terrific kid, and he is still just a kid. But yeah, I can't wait to see Ben Old this afternoon. The Phoenix have added to their roster as well in recent weeks with Houston Salas, the Costa Rican international, joining the side. He's had half an hour off the bench in the last couple of games. What role do you see Houston Salas playing in the home stretch?
Well, what I would say is get on Sky Sport half an hour early, because we are going to have a look at Houston Salas today and the impact that he has made. And we haven't seen much of him, Piney. You're right. The sample size is relatively small, but he has played very important roles when he has come out onto the field. In particular, in those kind of cameos, those introductions that we saw against MacArthur and Perth, and we've seen his World Cup quality shine through. Now, there's been 3 huge moments that he's been involved in, and I think they've probably been underappreciated, although Phoenix fans did jump on one of them. He does a great job of just nullifying, just pushing Uli De Villa off his mark right at the death against MacArthur when he was searching for the equalising goal. He's also snapped at the heels of Clayton Lewis just moments before that, and we'll take a look at that on Sky Sport this afternoon. But the thing that I loved was the Andy Robertson-esque pressing, the sprinting that he covered over the course of around about 80 metres against Perth. And he gets there and he gets in front of Taggart right at the death again. So he seems to be a player that has simply injected himself. He has a plug-and-play mentality. He understands the principles, the dynamics, gets his role within the side, and has infused the Phoenix midfield with even more energy. They've become even more combative, because if you put them alongside the likes of Rufer and Pennington and Altay, I think you've got a recipe for a very resolute Phoenix midfield.
All right, and just to finish, we've seen the Wellington Phoenix produce players who have gone overseas and in many cases done particularly well. Libby Kakachi's the best example. We've seen Sarpreet Singh and Ben Waine and others leave the club and go to big clubs, or big leagues rather, in the Northern Hemisphere. When you look at this roster and some of the young players, and you've mentioned a few of them, do you see the same path being trodden by a couple of current Phoenix youngsters in the years ahead?
I do. And Piney, I think if you want to talk about whether or not we should appreciate this side and give them the attention that they deserve, I'd take a different view from others and not look at what we've got immediately in front of us. I think we need to go to the end of the season, regardless of where the Phoenix finish on the table or where they finish in the playoffs. I think we will see a number of these youngsters create a lot of interest overseas. So enjoy them while they're here. And I'm referring to the likes of Alex Paulson. Lucas Kelly-Heald is only 18 years old. Finn Sermon is being so consistent alongside Scott Wootton. And then Ben Old, as we've said, he is the catalyzer for chaos in that midfield for this Wellington Phoenix side. And we're not even talking about the next generation that's coming through. We've seen the bench seeming to get younger and younger, turning into a creche at times for Giancarlo Italiano as he's navigated the injury worries. So if you're in Wellington, or if you're going to be in Auckland in 2 weekends' time, get along and watch what is a really entertaining side, and is an entertaining side because of the young Kiwi players that they've got.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. See you in a couple of hours. Jacob Spoonley, former Phoenix and All Whites goalkeeper, and these days Sky Sport analyst. The Phoenix men take on Adelaide United from 5 o'clock this afternoon at Sky Stadium in the capital.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday, or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.